The Vietnam War was the first major conflict watched live in American living rooms. On a nightly basis, people saw planes dropping bombs, soldiers tramping through rice paddies, villages set on fire, and the suffering of the Vietnamese people. It wasn't distant anymore, it was right there, on screen. But beyond the broadcasts, there were the still moments. The ones captured by photographers who followed the war up close, frame by frame, risking everything to show what was really happening. These weren't just photos, they were proof, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Here are 15 of the most shocking photos from the Vietnam War you need to see. Number 15. The execution of Nguyen Van Lam. One of the most iconic and controversial photographs of the Vietnam War is the execution of Nguyen Van Lam, a Viet Cong officer, by South Vietnamese National Police Chief General Nguyen Nang Lo. The black and white image captured by Eddie Adams in February 1968 during the Tet Offensive didn't just show death, it showed it happening. And it looks totally shocking. The moment is suspended, Lone's arm raised, the barrel pointed, Lam's face locked in a second of knowing. There's no build-up, no after. Just this one man killing another, with the world watching. The photo raced through newspapers around the globe and shattered the idea of clean, distant warfare. It ignited outrage, debates, and decades of reflection. Eddie Adams won a Pulitzer but carried guilt over the way that frame defined Lone forever. Context vanished, the image stayed. That still frame didn't end the war, but it changed how it was understood. Not through strategy or speeches, but by freezing one brutal second too real to ignore. Number 14. Napalm Girl. Another haunting image is that of the Napalm Girl taken by photojournalist Nick Ut in June 1972. The photograph shows children running barefoot down a scorched road, their village behind them swallowed by fire. In the center, 9-year-old Kim Phuc, naked and screaming, runs with her arms spread wide as if trying to pull away from her own skin. She had just been burned in a South Vietnamese napalm attack meant for enemy troops, but which struck civilians instead. Her pain, raw and unfiltered, is visible in every inch of her body. Nick Ut didn't just capture the image, he carried her to safety, ensured she reached a hospital, and fought to save her life. The photo wasn't propaganda, it was an undeniable truth. Kim's image appeared in newspapers across the world and shifted the emotional tide of public opinion. It wasn't about numbers or maps anymore, it was about one girl running through smoke, carrying the entire weight of the war on her burned back. Number 13. Saigon Execution. Photographer Mark Riboud captured a unique perspective of the war in his photograph of a young Vietnamese man being executed by the Viet Cong in Saigon in 1968. Unlike the more circulated images from the American perspective, this shot turns the lens toward the internal fractures of Vietnam itself. The moment is intimate, without the distance of battlefield chaos. You're watching a local execution in a local street, a decision made and carried out not by foreign soldiers but by neighbors, by countrymen. The scene forces you to look at what civil war actually means, not flags, not slogans, but one man ending another's life over political alignment. There is no hero here, no defined villain, just a frame of irreversible violence carried out in full daylight. Riboud didn't glorify it. He didn't edit it, he just showed it, raw and undiluted. That photo remains a reminder that the war wasn't only fought between nations, it was fought on doorsteps, within families, and between people who once shared the same streets. Number 12. Evacuation at Hue. During the Tet Offensive in 1968, U.S. Marines evacuated wounded soldiers from a combat zone in Hue, Vietnam. This photo, taken by Horst Foss, doesn't show a battlefield, it shows the cost of being on one. A wounded Marine clings to his rescuer, half carried, half dragged through the thick haze of war. Another limp behind, expression locked between shock and pain. These aren't just men being moved, they're men being pulled out of a place that nearly ended them. You can see the urgency in the motion, the tension in the grip, the desperation in the eyes. There's no posing, no space to breathe. Everything in the frame is happening fast and too slowly at once. Foz knew how to frame chaos without making it cinematic. This isn't a photo of heroes or victims, it's a photo of human beings trying to escape with whatever's left. That's the reality of evacuation, no time for ceremony, just survival in motion, one injured step at a time. Number 11. The Last Patrol. This photograph, taken by Larry Burroughs in 1966, captures a group of U.S. Marines on their last patrol before being airlifted out of the battle zone. There's no sense of victory, no triumphant posture. Their bodies are bent by fatigue, their faces drawn tight with whatever's left after weeks of constant tension. One Marine stares blankly ahead, another walks with his head low, lost in some memory that hasn't left yet. The jungle around them offers no comfort, just more dampness, more weight, and more silence. You don't need to see bullets flying or bodies falling to feel the toll. It's right there in their posture, in the way each step looks heavier than the last. Burroughs captured more than an exit, he froze what survival looks like in real time. This wasn't a moment of retreat, it was a release. A quiet surrender not to the enemy, but to exhaustion, to numbness, to the simple hope of getting out with a pulse still ticking. Alright, now, let's look at number 10, Search and Destroy Mission. In this photograph by Larry Burroughs, a group of U.S. soldiers moves carefully through the Vietnamese countryside during a 1967 search and destroy operation. It's not a shot filled with movement or chaos, it's heavy, still, and loaded with the tension of what might be around the next bend. Their posture is guarded, every step deliberate, as if they're walking on glass. The jungle presses close, thick and watchful. This isn't a moment of combat, it's the silence before it, when everything in your body braces for what could explode from nowhere. The phrase search and destroy wasn't just a tactical strategy, it became a psychological condition. Every village, every tree line, every shadow carried suspicion. Burroughs caught that mental weight in one frame, faces drawn, rifles low but ready. You don't see the enemy, you see the anticipation of him, and in that waiting, the photo tells the truth about what it means to fight a war that never steps fully into view. Number 9. Tunnel Rats of Cu-Chi. The Cu-Chi tunnels weren't just strategic, they were a world beneath a world, and the soldiers sent into them were called tunnel rats, a name that carried both grit and doom. This photo by Don McCullen captures one such soldier moments before disappearing underground. He crouches at the entrance, face half lit, not by fear, but by calculation. What's below him isn't just darkness. It's a place filled with traps, ambushes, silence, and the smell of damp earth that never leaves your skin. The space was so tight that rifles were useless. They went down with flashlights and pistols, inch by inch. One wrong move could mean a mine, a tripwire, or worse, nothing at all, just a hand reaching out from the dark. McCullen didn't shoot this photo for drama. He let the moment speak. No crowd, no rush, just one man against a hole in the ground and everything it might contain. That was the war under the war, quiet, close, and unforgiving. Number 8. The Bombing of Hanoi. During the Christmas bombings of 1972, the roar of B-52s became the sound of judgment from above. Hanoi, North Vietnam's capital, was pummeled for 11 days straight in a final push to force negotiations. The photograph by Horst Fass doesn't show jets or firestorms, it shows what's left after the noise dies. A shattered statue of Lenin stands cracked and crooked in a field of debris, surrounded by buildings torn open like paper. There are no people in the frame, but they're everywhere, in the ghosted windows, in the broken bricks, in the silence that follows sustained destruction. This wasn't a surgical strike. It was saturated. The photo doesn't need blood to show damage. The absence of life says more. Lenin's crumbling posture against a city in ruin doesn't speak about ideology. It speaks about cost. The kind of damage that isn't repaired with treaties or headlines. Fass didn't take this shot to shock. He took it because the truth was already lying there in pieces. Number 7. A Moment of Peace. Amid gunfire and ash, Larry Burroughs captured something war rarely allows: quiet connection. In the middle of a firefight, a U.S. Marine kneels, cradling a wounded Vietnamese child. There's no glory in his face, no triumph. Just hands doing what they're not trained to do: hold, comfort, protect something fragile. The child clings, not screaming, not moving much at all, around them. War doesn't stop. But in that single frame, it fades just enough for this moment to happen. No enemy, no orders. Just two people in a war neither asked for. The photograph doesn't paint over what's happening. You still feel the urgency, still see the grime and gear, but it shifts focus from destruction to human instinct. Burroughs wasn't romanticizing anything, he was just paying attention when something real happened. No one remembers this Marine's name. No medals were handed out for holding a bleeding child. But this image stays because it wasn't supposed to exist. And when it did, it reminded us what could still be saved. Number 6. The Hanoi Hilton. Officially, it was Ha Sha Lo Prison. To American POWs, it was the Hanoi Hilton, a name soaked in irony and pain. The photograph by Dick Clapp shows prisoners behind the bars of narrow, dimly lit cells, faces sunken, ribs visible, expressions half buried under exhaustion. Some stare through the lens. Others look at nothing. These weren't brief captures. Pilots held here spent years in confinement, some in solitary, many enduring torture and relentless psychological pressure. This photo doesn't dramatize any of that. It doesn't need to. The confinement is in every line. Concrete walls, barred windows, bodies folded into corners. Clapp caught a moment of stillness, but the photo pulses with all that came before and after it. The war outside didn't end inside those walls. It just changed form. The resilience shown here isn't loud. It's in the eyes that stayed open, in the grip on the cell bars, in the quiet defiance of men who endured more than the public ever saw. Number 5. The Fall of Saigon. The fall of Saigon in April 1975 brought a brutal end to a long war and a sudden beginning to something else entirely. Hubert Van Es captured the moment in a single image: a helicopter perched atop a rooftop in the city's final hours, surrounded by desperate people scrambling to board. It wasn't the U.S. Embassy rooftop, as many believed. It was an apartment building used by CIA personnel, but that detail hardly mattered. The photo became the final word on a war that had already bled out. Civilians, translators, soldiers, families, all crowded into stairwells, clung to hopes that the last flight out might include them. The Americans were leaving, and with them went any promise of protection. The panic wasn't chaos. It was the focus. Every step, every climb was survival. Van Es didn't stage it. He just looked through the lens and let the moment reveal itself. The fall of Saigon didn't need narration. It needed only that frame: one helicopter, one ladder, and a sky that was running out of time. Number 4. Agent Orange Sit's devastation. The effects of Agent Orange weren't immediate like bombs or bullets. They sank into the soil, into the food, into the next generation's bloodstream. Larry Burroughs photographed a group of Vietnamese children exposed to the chemical, their expressions quiet but heavy with something too big for their age. There are no explosions in the frame, just faces, still and scarred. Agent Orange wasn't just a defoliant, it was a legacy written into DNA. Forests died. The water turned toxic. Children were born with deformities decades after the last drop fell. Burroughs didn't shoot this to make a headline. He was showing what happens when war chooses shortcuts. These kids weren't soldiers. They weren't part of a strategy. But they carried the cost in their bones. This image doesn't beg for sympathy. It just stays with you because war doesn't always leave a body in a uniform. Sometimes it leaves a child staring into the lens, still too young to understand what was taken before they even began. Number Dre. A Refugee Sit Story. The Vietnam War didn't just fill graves, it scattered people, cities collapsed, families split, and millions were forced to run with whatever they could carry. In a quiet, weighty frame, John M. Motten captured one refugee family. A mother holding her child, eyes fixed on something just out of reach. Maybe a boat, maybe a border, maybe just breath. There's no crowd around them, no backdrop of violence, just a pause, a still point between danger and the next unknown. Their faces don't show panic, they show exhaustion, patience, and that particular stillness that comes when there's no time left to grieve. Refugee wasn't an identity, it was a sentence. The war turned homes into memories and turned language and land into obstacles. This image doesn't show where they're going or where they've been. It just holds them in a single breath of still-standing survival. War pushed them out, but this photo pulls them back into view. Not as numbers. As people, unmoving, unflinching, still here. Number 2. The Price of War. There's a photo by Larry Burroughs that doesn't play sides. It doesn't wear a flag or speak a language. It shows a wounded Viet Cong soldier being carried by his comrades. Not with the ceremony. Not with fanfare. Just with the weight of necessity. One guy, limp and half-conscious, slumped in the arms of others who are barely upright themselves. Their uniforms are dirty. Their expressions worn beyond anger, beyond fear. This wasn't an image that ran in patriotic spreads or made its way into recruitment posters. It was too honest for that. Burroughs didn't frame it to spark outrage. He let the moment hold its own weight. Pain didn't discriminate. Suffering didn't check which side you were on. This was the cost, carried on backs, trudged through the mud. It's easy to talk about strategy and borders, but harder to look at this and admit that it all comes down to this: one man trying to keep another alive just long enough to see another sunrise. Number 1. The Legacy of War. Some scars don't bleed. Some are shaped like craters, filled with rain and laughter, and carry the silence of things no child should grow up around. Don McCullen photographed a group of Vietnamese children playing inside a bomb crater years after the war had ended. There's no tragedy in their posture, no fear in their eyes. But the ground beneath them says enough. This wasn't just a hole in the dirt. It was a wound carved by war and left to sit, unburied and unnamed. The children climb and run like it's any playground, but the landscape holds memory. This is what legacy looks like, when peace is declared, but the consequences stay behind. McCullen didn't force a message. He just let the contrast speak. Joy standing inside destruction. Time passed. Trees grew again, but the holes remained. Not just in fields, but in the way generations carried what they didn't cause. That crater, filled with laughter, held a silence that never really left. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.